Hey everybody, and welcome back to another limited editing video. So, today's concept is going to be ranking every MLB manager in a tier list. This includes the new guys as well, who I'll be sorting into two categories, cautiously optimistic and then cautiously pessimistic. For the guys who've been in the major leagues for a while that we have some track record for, they'll go into four additional categories: certifiably elite, solidly below average, solidly above average, and average. The reason I didn't want to do a horrible category is that, honestly, in today's current climate for Major League Baseball, it's kind of difficult to hire a horrible manager per se. There definitely are some that are below average, but I didn't feel comfortable making the assessment that anybody was truly atrocious. So, with that being said, what is my criteria for assessing management excellence? I have four general questions. Are they known as a good in-game manager? How well have their teams done relative to expectations? Are they known as a standout clubhouse culture guy? And then what, if anything, have they accomplished in the playoffs? Now, the weighting for these, honestly, is relatively arbitrary. It's going to be kind of up to the different aspects of who I see for each personal manager. If one guy I think is a really, really good in-game manager, that might outplay a little bit their performance relative to expectations. You get what I'm saying, right? But those are the four general things I'm going to be observing while ranking these players. I'm also going to be going in order alphabetically in the American League and then to the National League. That's arranged perfectly along those lines with all these pictures. With that being said, let's hop right into it, starting with Mark Kotsay. Now, I would say Mark Kotsay has been about an average manager in his time so far in Oakland and then Sacramento. Most of his teams have done pretty poorly. The last couple of years, they've gotten a little bit better, but he hasn't really been given much. And frankly, for where the franchise was when he took over, I think he's done a pretty decent job with it. They're going to need to climb into that next echelon of excellence, in my opinion, before I can give him anything above an average. But he's done relatively decent with what he's been given, and he's been given some of the least of any manager in Major League Baseball. So I think he's done pretty decent with that. We now have the Orioles' new management hire, Craig Albernes. I'm cautiously optimistic about him and his performance, honestly just based on how well the ownership group is maneuvering this offseason. Wasn't a big fan of the Taylor Ward move, but they've made additional moves since then that really show they're going for it, and they believe this is the guy to take them to the next level. As such, because they're such full bore going in that direction, I gotta assume he's going to be the guy to take them to that next level, or at least I can understand them believing that. So, and also he has a pretty decent resume based on what I could find. I'm cautiously optimistic about him. Not much more to say at this point. Alex Cora. So, I would say Alex Cora is solidly above average. There are some things about him I'm not the biggest fan of. Obviously, the whole sign stealing thing in 2018 was a big red flag. He's had some underperforming teams, I would say, relatively speaking, over the last, half decade of his management experience. Last year was pretty good. 2018, besides the sign stealing stuff, obviously one of the most elite teams in the last 20 years. I think there are some warts to his game, to his management game, but overall, I can't give him anything less than a solidly above average based on what he has managed to accomplish, especially last year in what was a relatively difficult season to navigate based on the trajectory of the roster at certain points. With that being said, the next guy, Will Venable. I think Will Venable so far has done an about average job. He took a really, really tough roster and he's shown progress with it, right? So with that being said, and same thing as Kotsay, until I see him really start performing drastically above average, his teams start performing drastically above average, I'm going to keep him in that average category. He's not known as like an exceptional in-game manager or anything like that would kind of outsize those other aspects of performance, in my opinion. I'm going to keep him in average for now, with ample room for upward growth. He is considered relatively young for a manager. Next up, Stephen Vogt. This is our first guy I would consider to be certifiably elite. Based on what he's been given the last two seasons, he has been nothing short of outstanding. There's a reason he won Manager of the Year, I believe, back-to-back years. At the very least, he won last year. I don't keep up to date as much with those awards. But regardless, he took a roster last season that was middling, around 500, and literally led them to winning their division. Year before, they won over 90 games. Playoffs haven't been great, obviously, but you can't doubt how good of a clubhouse culture guy he is. And honestly, as an in-game manager, with all the pieces he has in that bullpen, trying to navigate all that, and the fact that their position player group wasn't that good last year, I consider him to be just absolutely outstanding. Back-to-back guys in that category. Obviously, there's still a stain of the 2017 Astros scandal. I'm not going to try to downplay that or anything, but it's been proven since he came to Detroit. The dude is just a fantastic in-game manager, one of the most active in-game managers in Major League Baseball. He's helped build a winning culture in Detroit, which they hadn't had in, as you can see by the hat. I mean, I'm a Detroit fan. He's helped build a winning culture in Detroit, which they hadn't had since the mid-2010s, at the very least. He's outstanding. He truly is. He's one of the most elite managers in Major League Baseball. If the Tigers give him a few other pieces to work with this offseason, I think the Tigers are going to be a team to look out for going into 2026. Next up, we have Joe Espada of the Houston Astros. It's tough with Espada because he's definitely done some good things, but I'm going to keep him an average because what really knocks him down for me is being one of the key pieces in last year's team that mishandled so many injuries, right? And he's part of that, obviously. I mean, he decides, at the end of the day, he decides who goes out there, who plays. He's part of the management team, right? He had done some good things in years past. Honestly, based on the amount of injuries they had, I think that they did pretty good last year relative to that. But when you have just that level of fiasco last season, right now I'm going to knock him a bit for that. I thought that was some of the worst management in that regard I've ever seen. Matt Quatraro for the, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, for the Kansas City Royals. He took a team that was horrible, and then he turned them into a wild card team literally over the course of one season. That was incredibly impressive from 2023 to 2024. 2025, they underperformed. All that kind of washes out to me, and he sits in roughly average. Again, for a lot of these guys, what happens in 2026 is going to determine in large part how I view them, right? Because these dudes, all the guys that are right now in the average category, need to show upward mobility. They need to show upward growth. Quatraro's had ups and downs. Again, he's not known as an exceptional in-game manager. He hasn't had a bunch of postseason success or anything like that. He has had some. I'm going to need to see a little bit more before I bounce him up or down on this list. Kurt Suzuki. He's a guy I am cautiously pessimistic about, and I'll tell you why. First of all, 1-year contract. Ridiculous for a new manager. You almost never see that. And second of all, he's playing for Artie Moreno, right? So just on the basis of that, if he's going to be one of his puppets, it's going to be a really, really rough year again in Anaheim. As somebody who lives close to their stadium and goes to a number of the games, I want to see them be good. And I just don't know if Kurt Suzuki is going to be the answer. I don't know how good of a manager he's going to be based on the criteria I laid out. But I can say that if he's an Artie hire, he's probably not going to do that well. And that kind of bums me out. Derek Shelton. So this is going to seem a little brutal, but Shelton, in my opinion, there was not really any upward growth with the Pirates, right? In terms of their on-field performance. He had the team for a number of seasons. And yeah, you can complain about the budgets, you can complain about the roster additions. I'm one of those guys who really thinks the Pirates need to go all in. It's nice to see them spending a little bit more this offseason. But he took a roster that didn't have much going, and you saw basic stagnation, if not some degradation over his period there. I would consider him to be a solidly below average manager right now. He can jump up, obviously, like any of these guys, but it's really difficult, especially considering what Don Kelly did with the team after he was fired last season. There was definitely a lot more talent on that roster than I think he was being able to squeeze out of. Aaron Boone. This is going to be one of my more controversial selections of this video. I think he's solidly above average. Is he elite? No. If you looked at just the pedigree, in isolation, just the records he's posted year to year, you'd think he belongs in the certifiably elite, but he's in one of the most advantageous situations in all of Major League Baseball with the ownership group that he has and the roster he's given every year. And he doesn't go far and beyond. In-game management, there has been some stuff. It's kind of a question whether it's him or it's ownership in general, but I have to give it to him for one big thing. There's a reason I think he's solid above average: clubhouse culture. He somehow keeps that team together and keeps that team believing, despite the fact they're playing in one of the most harsh media environments in all of Major League Baseball. He keeps them playing for each other. He's beloved in that clubhouse. And he does have a pretty impressive resume. I know a lot of Yankee fans wanted me to give him solidly below average. I don't think that's a fair assessment. He does need to actually win something to be considered, in my opinion, certifiably elite, because he doesn't have some of those outsized aspects. He's not a fantastic in-game manager. His teams don't perform wonderful, relative to expectations. But I do think he's still solidly above average. Next up, we have Dan Wilson of the Seattle Mariners. Honestly, he's only been there for a couple seasons. Based on what he accomplished in the postseason last year, especially based on what the franchise had not been able to accomplish in the last 25 seasons, right now I got to consider him solidly above average, right? I mean, there's in-game management, not the best, right? I mean, I know that he's made some kind of questionable decisions in the postseason last year, but clubhouse culture, there's no doubting this guy's one of the best in Major League Baseball. You can see based on how his team plays for him. And he did have significant postseason success, and I think his team performed better than a lot of people could have given him credit for. Is this some recency bias? I'll admit yes, but the management flow in Major League Baseball evolves so quickly that the most recent examples of success, generally speaking, in my opinion, are the best examples of the best current management practices. So I do think he belongs in that category. We'll see how he performs in 2026, but for now, he definitely is a solidly above average manager. Kevin Cash. I think Kevin Cash, the last few seasons have definitely hurt him. The thing is, he is given one of the lowest payrolls year in and year out. He's given an assortment of talent year in and year out that is, well, we'll say not upper tier. And he always has a competitive team. I think he's done a good job. He has a solidly above average winning record in his time there. And again, not been put in the best situation. In-game management stuff, I mean, he's had some ups, he's had some downs, that's for sure. He was one of the pioneers of the opener, but there was that moment with Blake Snell in the 2020 World Series. I think he's solidly above average, but I think at a time I would have considered him certifiably elite. I don't think he's quite there anymore. Skip Schumacher, he's in a Marlins cap here. He's going to be the manager of the Rangers. He has managed recently. He had one really good team and then one kind of below average team. Honestly, I would consider him about average because of that. It's tough, again, to evaluate guys who come in with relatively low expectations, surpass them one year, then because of those high expectations that he just set, underperform them. I don't see him as a fantastic manager. I don't see him as a bad manager. I see him as pretty even. We're going to need to see a few more seasons out of him before I can consider him to be either or. Most managers are going to probably fit into that average category because that's just kind of how averages work. But I do think he's about average based on what I've seen from him. I'd like to see some more. He'll get a real chance with that Texas roster to do something. We'll see what he can do with it. John Schneider. Schneider is not the best in-game manager. However, based on the run his team just went to, based on how he fights for his guys, based on the clubhouse culture I know is present in Toronto right now. Guys want to go to Toronto. Guys want to play for Schneider. I have to consider him certifiably elite. He is not the mega mind these other two guys are, right? He's not. I'm not going to say that he is. But I think he makes up for it with his energy and with his fight. Downright certifiably elite. Game 7, World Series. Yeah, they blew it. But I don't think a lot of people prior to the season expected them to be anywhere close to there. Downright certifiably elite. Torey Lovello. He's one of those guys that I think kind of sits between the solidly above average and the average. I'm going to bump him down to average now because the last two seasons have been, in my opinion, disappointing. 2023 was drastically above expectations. His team made a run all the way to the World Series. They weren't the best regular season team, but you got to give him credit for that. Last 2 seasons have not been very encouraging. I think he's trending towards solidly below average, if I'm going to be honest with you. But because of that 2023 season, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. The Diamondbacks had a lot of injuries last season. They got a few guys coming back this year. We'll see how their roster overall performs. We'll see how what he can get out of his team, relatively speaking. I'm going to keep him an average for now. But like I said, I think his arrow is trending down at this point. Walt Weiss. He has not managed in the major leagues since the mid-2010s. That was for a poor Rockies team. Do I believe he's going to come into the Braves? Do I think he's what the Braves need? They have a young roster full of high upside guys. I would have thought they would have tried to go for somebody who's on the younger side, who can really champion that new age analytical approach. The fact they went old after their last manager was exceptionally old as well, to me gives me reason to be cautiously pessimistic. The thing about cautiously pessimistic is I don't really know. I mean, like, again, he hasn't managed in 10 years. I wouldn't feel comfortable trying to assess his performance based on what he did with the Rockies over a decade ago. But I don't know how I feel about that ownership philosophy of bringing him in for this team. I hope I'm wrong. I like the Braves. I'd like to see the Braves do well. I don't know how I feel about him being the hire there, though. Craig Counsell, certifiably elite. He's one of those guys that the in-game stuff is so exceptional. His feel for the game is so exceptional. I think it outdoes a lot of the other stuff. I know he keeps a pretty good clubhouse as well. He was great for a lot of years with the Brewers, beating expectations every season. He hasn't accomplished anything in the postseason yet. That is one wart on his resume, in my opinion, considering he has had some pretty talented teams going into it. But this guy is one of the biggest brains in Major League Baseball. I think he's up there with Vogt and Hinch for the best in-game manager. Certifiably elite, what can I say? Francona. This is going to sound brutal, but again, it's what have you done for me lately? The dude has one of the more impressive resumes in Major League Baseball on the basis of pure accomplishments. However, his feel for the modern game in 2025, I believe, is solidly below average. And for all of you that are going to come after me for saying that in the comments, go watch the 2025 NL Wildcard Series. He had basically all of his best starters ready to come in and perform in that series. And his team gave up double-digit runs, if I'm not mistaken, or at least close to double-digit runs in both games. And his two best starting pitchers, Nick Lodolo and Andrew Abbott, threw, I think, a combined less than 2 innings. I don't think he's necessarily equipped to be a modern manager in the Major League space now. Great clubhouse guy, but one of the worst in-game management performances I've ever personally seen. His team performed better than expectations, but they were still barely above 500, and they do have a lot of talent on that roster. I might get flamed for this. I do think personally that is my opinion of him at this point. Again, great resume. If we're going off just legacy resumes, I think he'd be in the solidly above average to maybe even certifiably elite. But for today's current climate, I think he's solidly below average. For the Colorado Rockies, Warren Schaefer. Now, I'm going to be cautiously pessimistic, not based on his resume, which I know is pretty impressive, both as a bench coach, and then I think he's had some experience in the minor leagues, if I'm not mistaken. That was pretty decent. He's being put in a tough situation by his ownership group. There's just no doubt about it. The Rockies are in one of the worst positions in Major League Baseball. They don't have a good prospect group. They don't have a lot of good young players. They don't have a great organizational strategy. They do seem to be trying to revamp it. I'm excited for that, but I need to see something before I am actually going to go ahead and, crown it a new era of baseball in Denver. And for him coming into that situation, coming into this messed up layout, I don't know how well he's going to fare as somebody who's never had Major League management experience. So I'm a little worried for him. I don't think he's necessarily going to do poor relative to his expectations. It is going to be tough, though. I am cautiously pessimistic about him being the new hire as manager. Dave Roberts. Now, again, I might get some flame for this. Back-to-back World Series champions 3 times in the last half decade. The dude's certifiably elite. He's certifiably elite. I mean, clubhouse culture, might be the best guy in the major leagues. Just for a pure clubhouse culture. His team loves him. They play for him, right? In-game management, he used to be kind of poor in that regard, in my opinion, if I'm going to be completely honest. He has turned into one of the best in-game managers in Major League Baseball. Look at the World Series. The way he was able to keep his hand on the pulse of the games, not pull his pitchers too early, not pull them too late. What he did with Yamamoto in Game 7. The dude had a generational run this postseason. And again, back-to-back World Series champions 3 times in the last 5 years. Say what you want about 2020, whatever. They've won the last 2 seasons. Dude's one of the best managers in Major League Baseball. You can make an argument he's number 1 just on the basis of the overall resume. I don't know if I'd make that. I don't know if I'd want to hire him over other guys if I'm starting a team. I still think he is in that S tier category. Next up for the Miami Marlins, we have Clayton McCullough. I think, based on what he accomplished this past season, as well as a few of the things he implemented, this is kind of the thing that separates him, in my opinion, even though he's only had 1 season, from some of the other guys that have had a little bit less time, or even a little more time, but haven't done what he's done. He's had some innovation on his side. Look what they started doing with pitch calling at the major league level. I know they were doing it at different levels in the minor leagues, but he was part of the integration process for that at the major league level. Go look that up if you haven't. I made a video about it. He's done exceptional with mitigating that out. He's pretty good at lineup construction. I think he's a pretty decent in-game manager. It's clear the players want to play for him based on how they performed last September. They had a really good run. I'm excited for the state of baseball in Miami right now. I think he's a great guy to take them to that next level based on what I've seen of him personally. Again, could be a high riser or a big dropper based on how he performs in 2026. I do think right now I'd consider him to be solidly above average. He has really impressed me in his short time in the major leagues. Speaking of dudes who've impressed me in short time, Pat Murphy, 2 seasons, certifiably elite. In-game management, it's tough because he's put in a precarious situation in Milwaukee. He's constantly having to shuffle guys in and out. I think he did a really good job relative to what could be expected of him, especially because of his advanced age. I don't want to, start bringing that into it too much. A lot of these guys are around the same age category. I know he's one of the oldest managers, but you get what I'm saying, like in that 60s, 70s range. He performed so well in that regard. Great with pinch hitters, great with platooning, great feel for the game. One of the best clubhouse guys in the whole of the major leagues. Wasn't a big fan of him constantly making comments with the Dodgers budget and stuff like that. I think that constantly trying to make it a David versus Goliath situation when they won more games than the Dodgers in the regular season was kind of funny, but none of that takes away from how good of a manager he is. He truly is fantastic, and he seems like a super good guy too. If you want to look up him asking each member of the media to introduce themselves to him before the NLCS last year, dude's just a class act. I'm a big fan of him. And the pocket waffle thing, pocket pancake thing, one of the best running gags in Major League Baseball. Carlos Mendoza, if you asked me after 2024, I probably would have considered him to be solidly above average. I've never been a big fan of his in-game usage of players. I don't think he's the best in that regard. But with what's come out about the Mets in the last 365 days, and with how they performed last season on the field, as well as, like I said, what's come out in terms of their culture stuff, he's solidly below average in my opinion. I think he's on the hot seat. If they come out and go 81-81 again, he's done. If they come out and are 10 games under 500, a third of the way through the year, he's done. One of the most pivotal moments of any manager's career is going to be Carlos Mendoza's performance in the early days of 2026. It's tough right now. Rob Thompson. Again, this might be a little bit controversial. Rob Thompson, I'm not a big fan of his in-game management style. And at the clubhouse thing, they keep underperforming, right? They keep underperforming. They cannot do almost anything in the playoffs, despite having one of the most talented rosters in the major leagues. And they have a lot of controversy in that clubhouse, man. We'll kind of see how that goes in 2026. It's going to be an interesting season. I think it's similar to Mendoza. If they come out and they underperform, if they have another underperformance in the postseason, I think he's gone. He's also just not really on the cutting edge of some of the analytical stuff that you'd like seeing newer age managers be on the cusp of. So, yeah, if you're going to have a category for solidly below average, I think he belongs in it. I don't think he's a bad manager, but I also don't think that he's in any way above average or even necessarily average. Don Kelly. We only got to see a half season of Don Kelly, right? In that time, I would consider him to be a solidly above average guy. That might seem like I'm, a little bit of recency bias, but the culture shift in that Pirates clubhouse was drastic. They played depressed. They played without heart. They played just really poor quality of baseball before Don Kelly was hired. They were almost 500 after he got there, if I'm not mistaken. He got ejected multiple times. He fought for his guys. In-game manager, I think he's really good. He was always known as a really smart player when he was on the Tigers, and then when he made his way to, I think it was the Marlins to end his career. He was on the Pirates early on. I think that's where this picture's from. I think that he is going to be one of the better managers in Major League Baseball. I think he could be the next Craig Counsell. Right now, I can't rank him too highly, but I am very high on him entering the 2026 season. I'm also pretty high on the Pirates. They're adding good pieces. I believe they're going to be good in 2026, at least around 500. That'll be my expectation. If they're below that, might have to drop him. Ollie Marmol. It's tough because he hasn't been given a lot, but I think I'm going to have to give him solidly below average. If I'm not mistaken, players said that the number one guy they didn't want to come play for. And St. Louis has not outperformed expectations in any regard. They've had positive momentum, I think, over the last couple seasons, but I don't know how much that's the maturation of some of the guys in their roster and how much that's Marmel's great management style. In-game management, I think he's relatively average. I haven't noticed anything poor. I haven't noticed anything outstanding. His teams haven't accomplished anything in the postseason. And again, clubhouse culture matters a lot to me. He is not known as a good guy in that regard. So I think I would consider him to be solidly below average. The last three guys are all new hires. So none of them are going to go into these four categories. Craig Stammen, I am cautiously optimistic about. I could even say very optimistic about. The dude was known during his playing days as one of the smartest guys in Major League Baseball. I think he's going to live up to that. He's a wizard when it comes to analytically approaching the game. If you've heard him talk baseball, you know that to be true. I think that's the type of guy the Padres need. They need to get as much out of this roster as they can. They already have a lot of big titans. They're going to need to get value from the margins, though, entering 2026. I think he's a great guy to do that. I am very bullish on Craig Stammen entering 2026. Tony Vitello of the Giants. He had a great culture going at Tennessee. One of the best runs for a college baseball manager, I think, ever, if I'm not mistaken. I don't follow the sport too closely in that regard at that level. He literally took a pay cut to come to the Giants. That to me shows he's hungry. He's hungry. He really wants to come in and do well. The Giants team needs some great leadership. I believe in him to take this team to the next level, at least being solidly above 500 team. I'm bullish on him too. Am I as excited for him as Stammen? No. I do think he's going to be a pretty good manager, though, at the very minimum. And the last guy, Blake Butera. I'm going to put him in here for one reason principally. He's the youngest manager in Major League Baseball, right? That to me means he had to do stuff that was so outstanding organizationally to rise to this position. I'm intrigued, right? I'm not saying he's going to do well. I'm not saying he won't be in the solidly below average category if I do this again next offseason. But there's something intriguing about somebody so young being hired to manage a Major League Baseball team. That to me tells me there's something here. There's something we should pay attention to. And that's got me cautiously optimistic. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, everybody. If you made it this far, I appreciate you watching. And if you did, consider checking out any of these other videos on your screen right now for other content just like this. Also, if you ever see anything you'd like to see me detail in the video, feel free to reach out to my email, basebpoet@gmail.com. And if I end up using your idea, I'll give you a shout out. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.